Total Recap. Total Recap. Total Recap.
Hello and welcome to our Total Readcap episode for Dune by Frank Herbert.
Yeah,
Today we will be discussing Dune.
the first in the Dune series. We have. Are you actually recording?
Yeah, we're recording.
We have
We have a
special guests, Smiles, and two other people who have not read the book.
Sorry.
Sorry
Yes,
for party rocking.
Well, hold on. The people who didn't read the book are just our studio audience. Okay, they're just here for comedic effect. You're here to laugh
They
at
say
our
one
jokes.
word, they're gonna get kicked out.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually read the beginning of the book.
Hey.
So
What's
did
your
I.
favorite part?
Nice.
It was only the beginning, so I got to like how there was sand and stuff.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's really the beginning. All right. Well, does anyone want to give us a quick summary of the book for our fans and such?
Yeah.
The main character is basically God, and he manipulates a local culture into overthrowing the Empire with him. And then he does.
Yeah, and the sort of main thing is they do this on the planet Dune, which is a desert planet, and that has this thing on it called spice or melange. It's this like kind of geriatric drug that helps you kind of be young, makes you live young, and also if you live longer. I guess that's the word. And if you ingest it in enough quantity, it actually gives you special powers. People can look, prescience. You can look into the future, that sort of thing.
But you kind of have to be like genetically able and trained in order to take advantage of that.
Yeah. So not everyone necessarily has the power to be prescient, but
it's to the extent of which you're prescient.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, right. So our main character, his name is Paul Atreides. He's a member of a major house in this galaxy. One of the ruling houses, the Atreides house. His mother is named Lady Jessica. She's a Bene Gesserit lady who's this ancient kind of cult of witches, this order of witches that they use the spice as well. Do they all use the spice, or? I know some of them do.
Others definitely do, and I think acolytes consume it in smaller quantities.
Yeah. And they're basically like just these witches who are kind of groomed for power and like groomed to like they have these special powers of the voice, which lets them kind of influence people and control people with their voice, basically. And they are kind of advisors to all the different like great houses and advisor to the emperor. And they basically have their hand in everyone's pocket and everyone's business. So, yeah.
Essentially, they have mastered their bodies, and then you have mentats who have mastered their minds. Which is another semi-faction. It's not. I guess it's less of a faction and more of a trained position.
Yep. Yeah, and so they, she. I guess the other thing, this is definitely spoilers, but so the Bene Gesserit have been kind of doing this genetic breeding program over thousands of years to create what's called the Kwisatz Haderach. Yeah, that's it. Who's a male who's able to access the genetic memories of both the male and female lines. Mm-hmm. He's able to basically access. Kwisatz Haderach is basically able to access all of the genetic memories of his ancestors on both sides, and that they think that that's Paul Atreides because he was basically bred for this. Kind of the Bene Gesserit were trying to do that.
Mm-hmm. So they intend for it to be, he was supposed to be a girl, and it was supposed to be his son, but his mother decides to kind of mini revolt against the sisterhood, and she decides she wants to give her husband, not husband, her duke, a son, because he wants a son.
Right, because Lady Jessica is technically not even the Duke's
She's
wife.
just concubine.
Concubine, Bene Gesserit concubine. So that's basically the setting for the story. So yeah, so Paul he's the Kwisatz Haderach. He becomes sort of this godhead figure for the Fremen, who are the Fremen, who are these people on Dune, and they basically take over the Imperium in this book. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the setting.
A quick note to the readers. I was able to. So one thing is I'm going to be taking down some notes, and you can see on here this notepad screen for some of the specific titles or names that might be confusing, because there's a lot of weird ass vocabulary in this story.
Oh, yeah.
And I was also able to specify who did and didn't read the story as we go on with our discussion, as indicated in the stream, just so everyone's on the same page.
And who read it recently too? That's the other thing, because there's 3 people who read it fully, and only 2 people have read it like recently. So
yes, so I didn't finish the book. I got as far as the sort of first 3 chapters of book 2. It's separated into 3 different books. Oh, I'm sorry, the end of book 3. So I got basically almost to the end, but I just didn't have the stamina to finish it. Spoiler, I was not a very big fan of the book, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And I don't entirely blame the book for it. I partially blame my, I'm trying to get back into the habit of reading. It wasn't I haven't been super on the ball with getting into and slogging through these books. And this is a book that is no stranger to just prose and just long ass paragraphs and extremely long
sci-fi
descriptions. Yeah, so it's not exactly the book's fault, but it's not the book's fault. That's my interpretation. Yeah.
all right, so who has some thoughts they want to start off with? Any
So
thoughts?
here's a quick question. What's the Gung Jabbar?
Great
Is that
question.
It's
Box?
literally just, I think, universally a device that just kills someone immediately.
It's like a needle with poison, really
Yeah.
deadly poison, basically.
I'm feeling.
But I
damn
believe I don't think I think that is a Gom Jabbar, but I don't know if that is the
The
Gom
Gom?
Jabbar. Yeah,
Right.
I think that it just defines anything
Yes.
that it functions in that way.
Because in Children of Dune,
Mhm.
Lady Jessica has a Gom Jabbar, and she hides one under her skirts, and she's wondering if she should kill one of the twins with it. But that's a different book.
For a different day,
Yep. So yeah, so Dune. I mean, first things first. I mean, Dune was obviously a huge inspiration for, namely, Star Wars. The Force and the mind tricks and spice and the desert planet and the desert people and the Messiah
Flame
figure coming from
crawlers.
the desert.
Yeah, I think you can see it pretty much almost everywhere in sci-fi.
Yeah,
and it's
It's
in a lot of fantasy.
it's like a foundational sci-fi book. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, definitely.
I do have a few notes that I jotted down
Yeah, please.
as well, but you can finish what you're saying.
I mean, again, I'm not super into the book, and I spread out an incomplete read over basically 2.5 months. So, I'm not super familiar, but, as Andrew said, I can't stop seeing it, everywhere. I totally get, now that I understand the context that this book was written, I totally see how its influences are literally just scattered across all of sci-fi and just fiction in general.
Let me ask you this, Steve, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you remember what was happening in the book when you thought I'm just done with this?
Good question.
I'm done. Listen, because I remember there was a point where I was like, man, I just don't want to listen to Dune anymore. But then, and
Powered through.
So I there wasn't the only if I just had this if we didn't, so we were supposed to talk about this book back in August,
A
early
few months
September.
ago, yeah.
So we've been pushing off this conversation. We had there was obviously a larger group of people who to get into this, and they didn't. So if we didn't have an impending reading
Deadline.
discussion, I probably would have just kept going and picking it up at different points or whatever. However, like, I also don't know that I would have even gotten this far if there wasn't like a planned discussion. You know what I mean? So like with enough time, I probably would have kept going. I don't know. There's just like, I'm generally interested in what's going on in the story. It's just the actual slog of reading it is what got to me. You feel me? I may finish it eventually. I may not. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did I have? For me, this definitely teeters on the line of like being an enjoyable, engaging story and just exploring the ideas that it wants to explore. I can definitely see like certain people not really engaging with the characters at all, because in pretty much the first 4 books in the series, the characters are like weirdos that all have just robotic personalities, and there's not too much to connect to. But I don't know. That's not really what carried the story for me.
Yeah, I definitely that's definitely how I feel about it. I really did like the themes and the ideas that it was exploring, but again, I just could not be invested in like the story because I didn't really care about the characters that much. Lady Jessica was probably my favorite character in this book, just because she was I felt she was really the only one who had like emotions and was like getting like angry and sad, and like
Yes.
Paul was a non-character for like a lot, like a very good like start of the book. I don't know. He really kind of it took him a while to come around, and so yeah, Lady Jessica was really the only one I felt like had emotions that I could relate to and really care about. And then even then, after and then they did her dirty in the other books. I think she really fell out. But that's a different story.
Yeah, I agree that Paul's kind of a robot, but I don't see it as. It seems like reasonable to me that he would be. Like, he's been trained his whole life
Certainly.
to be a mentat. He's been trained in the Bene Gesserit ways. He takes a bunch of fucking spice, and then he can see the future. And I mean, that's a lot to grapple with when you're like 15 years old and your dad just died, and like
You're
I
on
don't
a
know.
shitty sand planet.
Yeah, you're on a shitty sand planet, and everyone wants to kill you.
I agree. Like I get he's robotic, and from the sounds of it, this sort of problem only furthers itself in later books. But yeah, like in the beginning, I was almost not like impressed, but like I just thought like, oh, Paul is like this super cool, like he knows all this shit, and I just kept going like, oh wow, the author made a note to tell that he was like this really intelligent young boy, and like he knew all these things. He's like older beyond his years. But then
Every character though.
yes, like Paul stopped being this unique genius. But in the beginning, I thought like, okay, this is cool, like, whatever. Like, I didn't mind it, but yeah, like it stopped being unique by like the middle of book 2 for me.
Yeah, it was definitely like, I think it's definitely reasonable that these characters were as they were. I don't think it was unrealistic that maybe Paul was like this, but that didn't really make me care about him anymore. I don't know, like, and there was just so many intense scenes of like, yeah, this, as you said before, like this internal dialogue. The scene that comes to mind is when they were all sitting around at the dinner table, and when the Duke was still alive, and Jessica was there, and Paul was there, and like the smuggler was there.
Oh
like
my
It's a
God.
lot of
it
internal.
just goes from
dialogue,
person to person talking about their intense like thoughts that they're having, and like every single character notices all these little tiny like mannerisms that everyone does, and facial expressions, and the hidden meanings,
Fucking
and the
annoying.
wheels within wheels, and like it's just very intense plot. And like Paul
Yeah,
notices.
I
Jessica
feel like the only 2 perspective characters we have in that scene are Paul and Jessica, though, right?
Yes, I mean,
Which
really,
I mean
like
makes sense. 'Cause
in most of these things, like that's where the perspective of the story is mostly told when it comes to like, I guess House Atreides. Like,
yeah,
it's
you get
told
some
through
Gurney
theirs.
stuff. You get some Thufir Hawat,
Uh-huh.
but those are more
The
scattered.
Baron too.
Yeah.
I'll say with Gurney, his storyline was what got me like back into
Yeah,
the
I
book.
really like.
I love
Gurney's,
Gurney.
Gurney's stuff is some of my favorite stuff in the book.
It was just like 40 hours of talking about sand planets, and then we got back to like Gurney just like being mad at like his robot dad or something.
I will say I'm a huge sucker for like world building and just how much sense this whole planet makes,
I'll
and
give
how
it that.
just how much thought is put into the ecology of the planet and how it influences all these other things, how it basically defines Fremen culture, like, is just so engaging to me that it pulled me through the book.
That's probably my favorite part too. Is just like he literally built an entire planet and just like all of the ecology and like how the worms are like integral to this, and the worms create the spice, and the spice is what makes this planet so popular. And if you and if you bring all this water in and like terraform the planet, that it hurts the worms and stuff, and it's just this very like tightly well done stuff. That was definitely my favorite part as well.
I mean, either of you two might know this more than me, but like, how is Frank Herbert seen? Like, is he seen as like a Tolkien, where he like his world building was like extremely detailed, and he was like this kind of genius in the way he did it? Like, do you guys know much about like how Frank Herbert wrote this book?
So he was a investigative journalist for several years before. I think he did a bunch of odd jobs, but his inspiration for Dune was basically he had to write this report on these sand dunes in, I don't know, whatever state he lived in. And he wrote it, but I don't think it ended up getting published. And then he was like, this was kind of cool. So he spent like 6 years reading up on all this ecology shit and religion and philosophy, and he wrote Dune.
It's kind of like it's almost like obviously the Fremen and stuff are all like they're Arabic, and they have like all very like based in real world stuff. Isn't like I'm not sure if it's, I know there's some sort of parallel to like oil in the Middle East. I'm not sure if that's the water or the spice. I think it's probably the spice.
Probably the spice.
It's sort of like this rare resource that like the whole galaxy like relies on. It just comes from like this one planet, and how it just like defines this planet or something, and how it can be used for ill and for good and that sort of thing. So it's definitely like a real world, like they're based off the Bedouins and the Arab tribes and stuff.
Yep.
And even like the Kwisatz Haderach, I think that term is Jewish. It's Hebrew.
Yeah.
So it's all like very old world, like very ancient religion, but based off of Earth, which I think even this does take place in our universe, right? Like Earth is like takes place way in the future.
Because they mention Hitler in the second book, which is one of the few times in this whole series that I like kind of cringed.
Yeah, that was not great.
The other thing too is they do mention the Orange Catholic Bible.
Yes.
I think Dr. Yue gives to Paul.
Yeah, it's
like
his own special little version.
I don't know if you read the appendix, Eric, but the Orange Catholic Bible is basically after I think it was after the Butlerian Jihad. Basically, like all the religious leaders in the universe came together, and they slowly wrote this, and there was like a lot of conflict over what they wanted to put in and what they wanted to take out, and then that was like the final product after quite a while, I think.
It was basically like all the different religions came together and they made like one book, and they kind of took that. I think is what it was. I forget what it was called, the conclave or convocation or something.
Yeah, it was something along those lines.
I guess another important thing to mention is the Butlerian. How do you say that? Butlerian Jihad.
I think.
How there was a giant jihad against all thinking machines, all computers, and any machine made in the likeness of a man's mind. So all that stuff's outlawed. Robots are outlawed. Computers. So everything is very like low tech. Rio mentioned the mentats. They're basically human computers. They replace, robotic computers and stuff, because all that stuff kind of. I don't know. I can't remember exactly. Why did they go on that jihad? Was it just like they threatened humankind? So
it was basically just thinking machines were like dangerous, and they destroyed all of them.
Yeah, so that kind of also paves the way, kind of sets up the story for why we need this spice. We need it not only to the spacing guild needs it to like guide all the spaceships through space. The Bene Gesserit need it to do this and that, use their powers. We need it for kind of like prescience, because we don't have computers or anything. We only rely.
It's important for pushing humankind forward. in this universe where technology is limited.
Yeah,
May I ask a question?
Sure.
go for it.
What exactly did they say about, like, what did they say about Hitler? You mentioned it was, like, cringy. Like, what?
It was just kind of like this is like wait, this was in Dune Messiah, wasn't it?
Yes.
No, I remember they talk about Hitler. I'm pretty like certain.
Yeah, they definitely mentioned it in Messiah because Paul gives like a sugar wire reel of like
Yeah.
history of like,
Yeah.
quote unquote ancient planet to someone, and there's like this is the history of like all of the different leaders and dictators. Make sure to check out this Hitler guy. He was definitely the worst of them all.
Yeah.
That's basically what Paul said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think like in Dune it was like I think somebody's like talking how they should get rid of like the Fremens or something like that.
Oh
Somebody-
yeah, they reference I don't know, like genociding people. They don't make a direct reference to Hitler, I don't think, but they do in the second one.
A quick note: this book was written in the 60s?
1965.
So
That's when it came out.
I mean, like World War II was still fresh in everybody's mind. I don't
Pretty
think it's
fresh.
the
Yeah.
most cringy thing ever.
It's just like in these super advanced sci-fi like universes when they call back to things
Oh,
from our modern
oh,
times.
okay, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's this idea that we are like omnirelevant,
Yeah,
and that
Yes.
the things that are happening to us are the most important things that have ever happened in history.
yeah.
And I don't really agree with that, and it's just something I don't really like in my literary fiction.
It's almost like if we were today, just like we had mentioned, like I guess I can't really think of a good example, but like
Well, it's like thinking like 2,000 years from now, they're going to be like, it all changed when Trump became president or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
yeah, or like we're talking about someone from caveman times or something who like
Yeah.
I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it just seems like because this takes place like way in the future, so like for them to talk
Yeah,
about things
like
that happened
tens
on
of
Earth,
thousands of years, I think.
yeah, exactly. So for them
Oh.
to talk about something on Earth is just like it's absolutely insane.
That's also assuming that, like, no one has done anything,
anything
bad
worse.
after. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's so long ago, like, there had to have been.
When there's worse things happening in these books.
Yeah, yeah, right.
By
yeah.
far
That's a little
worse things,
silly.
especially in the later books.
Like,
It-
sure, it's
like
a
it-
footnote in some history book, but like,
Yeah.
there's like, things just probably happened, exponentially. Just there's probably genocides of 14 million people just every other decade.
There
You know?
yeah,
There's
like
the whole prison planet.
there's
Like,
Oh, yeah,
planetary
right,
destruction. There's Seleucus Secundus, which is a planet full of prisoners trained to become like warriors.
Like Australia.
Baba
Yeah.
Booey.
Yeah, right.
So I think I speak for a couple of us when I know like there's a lot of us didn't quite like the book so much. So I want to hear. I'm kind of curious as to Reno, like why your thoughts on it, like the themes that you like and the parts that you like about it. I'm kind of interested to hear about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I talked about this a little bit before. I just think, again, the world building, like how everything ties together. I think the Fremen are super interesting, like how their religion is so deeply tied. I think the idea of the Bene Gesserit, like going to all these planets and imprinting this religion,
Oh yeah,
such specific things in mind. Like they know exactly that Dune is important. Okay, so we have to get this Reverend Mother down to Dune to slowly like morph their religion so that we can abuse it at some point with this
really
like
like that.
hero story.
that is really good. Missionaro Protectiva.
Mm-hmm.
The Bene Gesserit
Missionaria
is
Protectiva. Yeah.
literally my favorite aspect of the book. Like, it provides most of the interesting like plot devices and abilities between Lady Jessica and Paul. That's the coolest fucking thing in this world. I would say. I mean, really, the concept of the Fremen, like just those two make the book for me. That's pretty much the cool thing. The culture of the Fremen and like the abilities and this widespreading like espionage mystic like lady warriors, I guess. That's like the other coolest thing here.
Honestly, one of my like biggest I really like the Bene Gesserit, but one of my biggest complaints about the series as a whole is that they hold on them for too long. There's too many books about them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I wish they would explore like the Bene Tleilaxu more, and
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know, just
seriously.
And what
the
is
the
that?
whole Mentat thing.
How do you spell that?
They're not really
Tleilaxu?
they're not really mentioned in the first one all that much,
Gotcha.
AXU, something like that.
Yeah, I guess
but
they're not really in this book.
they're where
Go ahead,
Mentats
sorry.
come from. Like those planets, and then they also, that so I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain.
Okay, no worries.
They're just like biological. They produce these things called golas, which are like clones of people, and they also are responsible for like mentat training.
Yeah, because I think the other thing about I don't know how to say that,
Tleilaxu.
Tleilaxu, is like they're like kind of on the borderline of producing like illegal technology, where like it's like advanced technology that's sort of outlawed since the Butlerian Jihad. So and Ixion,
I
planet
I
of
thought that was
Ix.
the Ix.
Yeah, well, they mention it too with the
I know the Ixions because the Ixions are very like hard technology, like electronic shit. But the Bene Tleilax are like it's all biological technology. They have their axolotl tanks. At a certain point, they learn how to produce melange, like synthetically.
Well, they're at least a source of like futuristic and advancing
Yeah.
technology in the Imperium. Well, they're not even part of the Imperium, are they?
I think they're kind of their own thing.
Oh, that's really funny. Just to draw a parallel that maybe only Eric would get. In Warhammer 40k, there's the Imperium, which is just giant Emperor of Man. But they source all of their technology from the Adeptus Mechanicus, which is this like society, the civilization that lives on Mars. That like the Empire is like all humans. It's like the biggest thing ever. But the only group of humans that's really not in the Imperium is this group called the Adeptus Mechanicus, and they worship machines, so it's like heretical to anyone else. However, like because of the Imperium relies on their production of technology, they just sort of let them believe in these heretical like machine gods, so that they can get all their tanks and their stuff. That sounds exactly like what you're talking about.
That's
Right,
kind of what
so-
the Ixions are. Yeah.
Gotcha.
What I was gonna say is like, so you were saying that do they come up with all of the mentats for the Imperium?
I'm pretty sure that I don't know if it's like definitively all of them, but I think mentat training is kind of a Tleilaxu thing.
So that's something that's definitely was inspired by Dune, I'm sure, because the Imperium relies on only the Tleilaxu, but the Bene Gesserit, because every leader has a mentat and
Truthsayer.
a truthsayer, a Bene Gesserit. So they definitely rely on these sort of fringe groups that they kind of tolerate it. And even the Spacing Guild, they rely on the Spacing Guild as well, because they have a monopoly on the space travel. So
Because they're the only people that have strong enough like prescience to be able to predict flight patterns. Safely.
yeah, and that's a similar thing with the in Warhammer 40k. The navigators are like mutated humans that
Yep. And the guild navigators are mutated humans.
they have the navigator gene that lets them look through the warp to guide ships. So yeah, and even the Sardaukar, that was another thing that inspired Warhammer, the Space Marines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much. Dune was very inspirational to a lot of sci-fi works.
One little thing that I didn't notice at all, I guess the first time I read through, but the second time I kind of picked up on was in the first chapter you have the whole the Gamjabar and the I forget what the cube is called, but he puts his hand in, but the humanity
Right.
test basically.
Mhm.
And
That's where I left off.
that's the first chapter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
For real?
it just didn't hook me at all.
I don't blame you.
Dude, I was big in those first few chapters.
Yeah, that caught me immediately. But the Reverend Mother Gaius Helgen, or Helen, whatever, says a human will, like, if a human's caught in a trap, they will pretend to be dead and then wait for their enemy to come over their dead body so that they can attack them and make one less enemy for humans. But an animal will gnaw their own leg off. to escape the trap. And then going a few chapters forward, you have the idea, like, when they're preparing to go to Dune, they're like, we could just flee the Imperium, basically get rid of pretty much everything we own, and just go off into deep space and run away. But knowingly, they go into this trap, and the Duke Leto dies, but in the end, they've lost a little bit of something. They've injured themselves in the trap, but they go willingly into it and like overcome the Harkonnens.
Yeah, I never noticed that. I guess that's the other thing is like that whole idea of like that trap and that the Emperor was in on it and kind of gave them the planet to like destroy them. I never quite understood how that all worked. So the Harkonnens originally owned that planet, and then the Emperor gave it to the Atreides. And how does that work? Like, why did the Emperor do that? Like, what was kind of the logic behind that?
Go ahead.
I think they directly reference it, but the thing that the Emperor fears is the fighting force of the Atreides is approaching levels similar to that of the Imperial Sardaukar. Like, there are troops in the Atreides army that are genuinely better than the average Sardaukar under the training of people like Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho.
Okay, sorry. Doesn't I mean, I remember they mentioned that in Dune, Children of Dune. Duncan Idaho killed like 19 of the Sardaukar before he died in Dune. So okay, so that's why they were in on it. And then did they just give them Dune as like was that sort of the bait? Was like the one of the
I mean, because their home planet is like impossible to attack. Like this is their generational home. They've been here for thousands of years. They're so well set up on it. They know the populations here. Like if they were planning an attack on them there, it probably wouldn't work, and it would be super obvious to like the Landsrod. And then that would backfire on them.
So a quick question about their home planet of Caladan, right?
Yes.
I was just gonna ask, like, who's in charge there? Like, do they
like when they leave?
Yeah, like, or now that, like, is it recognized in the Imperium that like House Atreides is like dead or whatever?
They still own Caladan.
Okay.
Oh, do you mean in the few years while they're like living with the Fremen?
Yeah, right. Like, what was
I
happening?
don't know if that's referenced at all.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, I didn't think about that till right now.
After the Atreides moved to Arrakis, Fenring took over while they were gone.
Oh, okay. So they had like a swap of like manors or houses, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if they technically like gave it up, but they moved pretty much everything to Dune for a while, just like while they were setting up. So I don't know necessarily if they lost it permanently.
Okay.
I think they were basically ordered to go to Dune because of the Emperor, right?
Yeah.
Didn't really seem like a question. Yeah.
It was just like, this is your new fief, and give us spice, please.
It just seemed kind of weird to me that they would give Atreides like one of the most important planets in the Imperium. I mean, they gave him, it was the planet that has spice on it.
It was basically something like, this is a super profitable planet, and it's something they can't refuse. And they needed them to move there, basically. And then they needed the Harkonnens. It's like, works out that it's a Harkonnen planet because they hate the Atreides, and they want to overthrow them and get their shit. And the Emperor wants that to happen because he doesn't want the Atreides to build up an army that can contest his. And then ultimately it fucks them over because the Fremen are like the biggest, baddest boys.
It's like they like stupidly underestimated their numbers. Like,
yeah,
like...
well, it's because it's in the appendix, I think, like directly explains this, but so they were trying to terraform the planet, and they didn't want anyone looking and being like, hey, this planet's slowly changing. So they were bribing the guild with spice so that they wouldn't take planet scans under the guise that the electrical storms were like interfering with it.
Oh, okay. That's kind of neat.
I did like that stuff. But that was cool. I did like Liet Kynes, he was cool. When he was alive during the book, and they were kind of like, he was like kind of on the edge of like betraying them, and kind of like convinced him to like go along with them and help them. I did like that, all that stuff when I think it was just before Paul became like, I don't know, he underwent like the Messiah change or whatever.
Yeah, that was super. I thought he was a great character. Like in general, the one thing that I will give praise on, it is kind of weird, especially knowing Frank Herbert's role in all of this. He wasn't necessarily like his background, because I think he did like a really good job of like painting like believable leaders as characters. You know what I mean? Like they really like built the Duke Leto's like power and like how he commanded respect in a room, you know, charisma on command video, and how
it's two very different ideas of leadership basically between the Harkonnens and the
it's
in general, like if there's any sort of themes to take away from this, I thought this was a good exercise in demonstrating the different types of like leadership in characters in fiction. This was a pretty good read on that.
Yeah, again, you know, it's like all that stuff is there. It's there for it to be a very like enjoyable story, but it's just missing that emotional core. Like all of the characters are good setups. All the side characters are really interesting. Jessica is so interesting. The planet is good. The conflict is really well set up. But there's no emotional core for me to really relate to. And when I don't have those characters that I can like kind of connect with and like have emotion, that it just to me it's just a world. It's just like an encyclopedia. It's just like a world, a built world with nothing in it to really like get into and like put my mind into, I guess.
And I think it's hard to contextualize especially without having read the second book, where I think it starts to paint that picture a little bit better. But the Atreides are better than the Harkonnens, but they're not really good people.
Yeah.
Like the Duke still takes advantage of propaganda teams. I mean, Paul is knowingly manipulating these people based on a implanted basically like a Messiah myth, and he's just using them to get himself power.
Yeah, like there's like a huge separation just in, you know, the moral boundaries between those within power and those without. Like everyone in power, they use propaganda and just these like manipulations of everybody, but it's like they live in like a totally different realm of existence, which I think is super relatable to just, you know, speaking to people in power or people with a lot of wealth. Like that whole dinner scene, you know, it just paints a totally different world. You know, people with money, they don't have to worry about aspects of survival like food and shit, but their life, their base worry is just like losing all their power, and it's a totally different way of living. It doesn't make them good guys or whatever, but it really paints just like a different life for people in power.
Yeah, and then when Delayed Jessica's pregnant, she changes the poison or whatever.
Yeah.
She goes through the spice agony.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And
the
scene, I guess.
Unborn child in her womb becomes suddenly aware and fully conscious just inside the womb, and she has all the memories of every single Reverend Mother from then on to exist, like all the way back. And it's just
wild.
I really like Aaliyah and the twins. Like they're weird and not relatable at all, but I love them. They're such interesting. Like what other series of anything has characters like that? Fucking these 8-year-olds that like at the end of the first book, Aaliyah is so young that her fucking palate hasn't hardened yet, and she's talking to these people with a lisp because she's like 2 years old.
Yeah, at the end of Dune, they give her. I don't know if they mention it in Dune or if they mention it in Messiah, but they call her Saint Alia of the Knife because she
stabbed the Baron Harkonnen
when they fight the battle with the Emperor. She's like going around slitting the throats of like all of these dead souls, so that the Fremen can take their water. So it's just like, so again, like I said, like there is some really unique stuff here, and there is some really interesting world building. Again, it just doesn't have that emotional core for me to really relate to really give it a good reading. You know.
Yeah. So we're coming up on 8 o'clock here. So does everyone kind of want to give some like closing thoughts, maybe a rating or something? I know we didn't have an extensive time to talk about it, but yeah, just give it in closing and maybe a message to somebody in a good summation, because I know this is a very difficult book to get into from the onset. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, this book definitely doesn't have the strongest emotional core. That's really, like, to me, not an issue at all. It's just not really the point of the book in my mind. And it has enough to make up for it. I will probably read this again at some point, but after 2 readings and the context of the whole rest of the series, this is probably a 10 out of 10 for me.
Steven?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's no story, it's no secret. Like, I had a very difficult time getting into this. So like, I guess I could sum up my thoughts as like, I have a great respect for the process of how this thing was written. The world, I think there's so many cool ideas. As a story, I don't like it at all. I give this probably a 5 out of 10 because it's some of the coolest world building I've ever seen. And this is coming from my biased perspective of not being a huge, lengthy reader. So that's what I give it. I think if you can handle wordier and deep sci-fi and appreciate world building, absolutely try and read this. Otherwise, just skip if you're a casual reader. Holy hell.
Yeah, that echoes my sentiments. I think it's definitely not for the faint of heart. If you wanted to read it to have a good time and enjoy some laser gun sci-fi, definitely not.
Yeah, the laser guns in this are fucking sick.
Yeah,
It is cool.
Holy shit!
It does take a little bit of thought and kind of some prescience even to get through this book. So yeah, my thoughts are well known, so I won't repeat it. But yeah, I would probably also give it a 5 out of 10, just because again, I enjoyed it. I got through the whole thing in a timely manner, and I did enjoy it. It was more positive than the negative for me. But again, yeah, just the stuff I said before. So yeah. Does anyone else, any of the peanut gallery, want to give any thoughts?
I have another cue. What do you guys? I know since you guys weren't that into the book, like, are you interested in the movie, or like what are your thoughts on that?
Almost certainly, yes.
I didn't look up, like, the entire time, though I didn't like it and I was confused by a lot of things. Like, I didn't like look anything up on the wiki. I didn't look up like visuals from the 1980s movie. So
I mean the new one.
Right. So after this, I'm going to look up so much stuff, and I'm very interested in how the movie's going to do it. Like, I'm very, very interested in how they're going to do this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of material.
Go ahead. Smile, sorry.
I just want to say, as much as I really sort of like Dune, I just think Star Wars is just such like an easier to chew galaxy.
Oh yeah.
It's
like not even like, I mean,
it's, and I know that we wouldn't have Star Wars, of course, without Dune. So like if you're interested in Star Wars, it's neat to see like the spinal cord of Star Wars, sort of.
That's part of the reason why I was interested, but like it's the thing, yeah, like I didn't realize like how important, like, I think it's a little different in movies because like if there's not interesting characters or like, you know, like emotional characters, like I can get like more into like the cinematography or the music or something. But I don't know, when it's a book and like the world building sounded awesome, but like I just couldn't really get into it.
Well, I think that's what also Star Wars does better.
Yeah,
at least in the sense of this is that since it doesn't just take place on Tatooine, you know, they go all over the place, so they have less time to go over like the whole economic.
It's a different story.
And the world in Star Wars isn't that complicated. It's actually like super simple, really.
It's very black and white, which, you know,
made it easier to digest.
I mean, yeah, Dune was immensely popular, but there's a reason why Star Wars was a fucking
Yeah, well,
cultural
the first
revolution.
2 Dune books I think kind of flopped, and Children is the
Oh.
one that made people like look back on the series. That was
Yeah.
his big first moneymaker.
I mean, if I had to comment on the movie, the new movie coming out.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it could. I'm very ambivalent about it because I think it can go either way. Because on one hand, there's so much of this book, Dune. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you cut off for like a second.
but you're good.
Yeah, there is so much of this movie that is like an internal monologue. They're
Yeah.
describing like Paul is describing these very intense like prescient visions that he's having, and like
Oh, you cut off again.
Yeah, you cut out. Oh, I can hear him talking in his room. Hello?
I don't know why that keeps happening. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, and they're like trying to explain how time is like crazy and stuff. So, and I don't know how well it's going to translate to a movie because it's a lot of like very weird things you have to explain that takes maybe several sentences to explain in a book. So I don't know how well it's going to translate. But on the other hand, there could be a lot of really interesting visuals. All of the Fremen stuff, the still suits, the Sietches, the las guns, the shields, all the fighting. They do all their fighting with knives and swords, and the worms, the sandworm riding. All that stuff is going to look so cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Sandworm riding.
It's gonna be beautiful.
So dope.
I'm excited.
Oh, you go here.
No, that's it. That's it.
Okay.
I'm just curious, like how well it's going to do in the like box office wise.
Yeah, the issue is
I could
Denny
see it-
Villeneuve
Got Timothy
movies flop a
Chalamet.
lot.
Yeah, I could see
But-
it kind of bombing, honestly. Even if it's like amazing, like
The cast
It-
is all
Yeah.
star though.
I think
Holy
that's-
shit.
I think that's the thing that's going for it is because you got Timothy Chalamet, and I think that'll help it a lot.
Oh,
like,
you get enough good media and advertisement. People will come in without even
Yeah.
knowing that it's a book.
Yeah.
People will get
I just think
I just think it might be like too much for some people. Like it's like I have a few because he's not. I doubt he's gonna like dumb things down.
Well, I don't know. Like there's a
the
lot
thing
you can
is-
fucking skip in this book, and you'd probably still
Yeah,
have a good story.
it's going to be 2 movies, by the way. It's
Oh.
going to be the first half and then
Oh.
the second half,
That makes
Good.
sense.
which
Good,
it
good, good,
needs
good.
to be, or else it would be insane.
You're
But-
going to cut it off.
But that's the thing, though. Like if you sometimes I mean, it's like hopefully
What I'm saying is like
if it's not all set up.
yeah, there's so much of this book that is really intense that can turn people off, but like there's a lot of material there that you can really like make something really, really, really
Yeah,
interesting.
I feel like it's either going to be bad and not make any sense, or it's going to be pretty unrecognizable from the book. It's just this feels so unadaptable in the way
Fucking Denis
it is explored.
Villeneuve.
I know, I really like Denis Villeneuve.
I am leaning towards. I think it's gonna be pretty good, and I definitely think it's going to be like visually. I think it's gonna be. Obviously. I think
Josh
it's gonna be
Brolin
out of
is
this-
Gurney Halleck.
That
All
is
right.
insanely good
Yeah.
casting, by the way.
I'm pretty.
In Idaho as
Is
Jason
Jason
Momoa.
Momoa.
Holy shit.
Wow.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm looking at all these fucking castings. Holy
Oh, you
shit.
haven't even. Oh yeah, it's like stacked, and I'm
Stellan
pretty
Whoa.
excited for it.
Skarsgård as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen
Oh.
is perfect casting. Or not, is it Stellan Skarsgård?
With this much money and talent, there's going to be
Yeah,
equally
Stone-
as much money in advertisement. People will see this movie. I just hope
Yeah.
it's good.
Who do they cast as Stilgar?
Oh shit. It's the guy from Sicario.
Really?
The Colombian assassin?
Yeah, yeah.
Benicio del Toro.
Benicio del Toro, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Fuck
Which
yeah.
is really good casting too.
that's
The
dope.
casting in this movie is like, it's the
This
best.
is
It's
so
probably
many
the best
fucking
casting
names. This
I've
is
ever
Pretty
amazing.
wild. That's
Like,
what.
And they have
Hook-
Dave
It's not
Bautista.
even just
Yeah.
stacked A-listers. It is stacked A-listers that are perfect for their roles.
Yeah.
Like, I read the book and then I looked up the movie and I was like, okay, who's gonna be who? And everyone, I was just like, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's what hooked me. Like that's what got my interest. Was like, holy shit. This is
Okay, well,
a single.
anything else before we head out for the night, boys?
I mean, if you.
Oh
if
yeah,
you-
we need to decide on the next book.
That's true.
Oh.
So
So
what
are
were
the-
the ideas?
I have a proposal, and it is Annihilation, which is the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy. A movie was made after it. There just seems to be a lot of potential in the book there. the movie kind of distilled some of its main themes and skipped a little bit of the narrative elements, but it still seems like a very strong read, and I'm still happy with the continuation of sci-fi books. I give a strong recommendation for Annihilation. I think it would be
Yeah,
a really
that's
good
what I'm leaning towards.
Yeah, I'd be down with that.
Could I throw
Smiles, what is your?
Star Wars Darth Plagueis?
I'm not. No,
Oh,
I'm not interested.
Not a goddamn chance. I'll read that and maybe discuss
I
it.
would definitely read that.
I actually would. That does. I've heard it's like the best Star Wars book.
I just don't think that would be good for the book club.
Yeah, and it's like
It, you
that
know
would
what?
be
Fair enough.
impossible to get. Like,
It is like a lot of
Bridget and Mary
justifying.
to read.
yeah. Oh yeah. I didn't even think about that. Like they're
It's
not
like
gonna.
a lot of justifying episode 1 stuff.
Yeah, and it's also gonna be like.
Going.
Yeah, I think
What?
that's a little too.
Then yeah, I'm fine with
Oosh.
Annihilation in
You're
that
not-
case.
You're not going to put you're not gonna put forward androids, do androids remove electric sheep.
I mean, I'd be fine. I would like to do that at some point. I'm fine with doing Annihilation for now, though. Especially since my last pick was such a flop.
Okay.
I don't know if that's necessarily your fault. It was good. It was good for the book club.
Yeah, it was just tough.
I apologize.
Very hard. It was only the first chapter, and it was rough. I could not. I just couldn't. I couldn't recite to you what happened.
Yeah, that was just like it was like the perfect book for me, and then I was like, I don't know, I don't think it's that hard.
Wait,
Oh.
Tyler, you're playing Valhalla?
What?
Okay, well, before this
Okay.
derailed,
Well,
Hold on.
thank you
next
for
book is
watching. Thank you for
Annihilation.
tuning in. This is what I have to say. TLDR, read it if you think you'd like it. Don't even attempt it if you don't think you'd like it.
May
That's
Odin
what I
came
be
have to
in
say.
with you.
pa-
Don't even fucking
All right.
try.
yeah, the next
Wait.
book is
Bye.
Annihilation.
Guys.
Tyler,
Bye.